already the question you sometimes hear being raised is, what is the right religious response to a Bernard Madoff? The right religious response from one of those people who might have really lost all their money or even a significant part of it. Are they required to forgive such a person? My understanding of the Jewish tradition is no, and for two reasons. One is obvious, the other is not as immediately obvious. The more obvious reason is Madoff at this point, from what we know, has not even approached the people who he so hurt and asked for forgiveness. In Jewish teachings, if somebody sincerely regrets the wrong they've done you and the harm they've inflicted on you is not irrevocable, and they ask for forgiveness, you're supposed to forgive. And you have to struggle with yourself. Sometimes it's not easy. Even the fact that a hurt is not irrevocable doesn't mean that the hurt is not deep. And so therefore the rabbi said the person has to ask you, and if you can't forgive the first time, then struggle with yourself and forgive the second time. A person is required to ask you up to 3 times. And it can't be all at once. They can't say, do you forgive me? No. Do you forgive me? No. But if you don't forgive after 3 times, in the words of Maimonides, the great 13th century Jewish thinker, actually I just dated him in the wrong century, the great 12th century Jewish thinker, Maimonides says you're an achzari, you're acting as a cruel person. So one thing is, Madoff has not at this point asked for forgiveness, but let's say he did. Even then it's also optional for yet a different reason. It's optional because the damage that has been done to many people is an irrevocable damage. The money that's been taken away is not going to be replaced. And the loss of money in many of these instances has been devastating. First of all, a number of foundations that help poor people, help people who were in desperate need and who needed this to meet some of their most basic needs, including medical care. That money is not going to be there anymore. And some of the people who invested money with Madoff have now lost it. So the damage to them has been irrevocable. There is no concept of cheap grace and a forgiveness where someone has done a great evil and cannot undo it. It's the obligation of people to think before they act. And part of what that means is, as an American comic writer in the 19th century, Josh Billings once put it, he said, it's easier to repent of sins that we have committed than to repent of those we intend to commit. Before we do wrong to another, we have to think through the implications of what we're doing. And if there's no exit strategy from that wrong, as there isn't in the case of a Ponzi scheme, if there's no way we're ever going to really be able to make it right, or if the ways of making it right are so far-fetched as to be virtually impossible, then we have to think through before we do it. And clearly the evil that was done here was thought through, but in a pretty malevolent way. And money was taken from people that could never be replaced. Damage can't be undone. I don't advocate that people walk around, their whole lives consumed by bitterness, because then in addition to having lost the money, they will be very unpleasant for the people who need to live amongst them. But if you're asking me, do people have a moral obligation to forgive an act of this magnitude, the answer is no. First, forgiveness has not been requested, and secondly, the damage is irrevocable.